Hello everyone, Jeff Connor here. I want to talk a little bit about the Sandra Bland situation. She's the girl who was moved from Illinois to Texas and then got pulled over by a police officer the following day for changing lanes without a turn signal. And one thing leads to another. She winds up getting pulled out of the car, getting tased, taken to the police station, and 3 days later she's found hung in a jail cell. I recommend watching the raw footage. I'll have the link posted to it down below the video here. Okay, she's driving at or below the speed limit. She's not driving fast at all. And the police officer accelerates up to her at a very high rate of speed, like he might be doing double the speed limit. If it's 30, if it's 30 miles an hour, he'd be doing 60, coming up on her behind her. Okay, and she moves over. It's a four-lane road. She's in the in what you call the left lane of her two lanes of traffic. She moves over to the right lane without a signal. Moves over, you can her what she says later in the video is, and it's perfectly feasible from what you see. She moves over to let him get by. Now, she doesn't use her turn signal, okay? But he's not using his lights either. This is a part that you don't see in the video, okay? He's not using his lights at this point. He's just rolling up behind her at probably quite a bit more than the speed limit, okay? What you do see is when she moves over, she does not use her turn signal, okay? My opinion is that his lack of lights and double the speed limit is a relevant factor to a lot of people. The first relevant factor that is probably not getting talked about the way it ought to be. I mean, if he's going to do that, I mean, technically, police officers aren't supposed to be breaking traffic laws. Uh, what I heard in school, I don't know how accurate it is, and I know it's not practiced, but what I heard is technically the legality is even with their emergency lights on, they're still not supposed to be breaking traffic laws. But that may depend on jurisdiction. I'd have to look more into it. This is something that I was taught or told by a teacher when I was a kid in school. So a lot could be different between then and now, and there and here, and whatever else you take into consideration. But she moves over, and then he pulls her over for that. So it's obvious that he didn't have his lights on before that. Okay, that's the infraction that she's getting pulled over for. And he walks up to the car. They speak briefly, but I think it's pretty clear from listening to her. Several things are clear at this point. When the police department spokespeople talk to the media, they'll say things like she was far from a model citizen, far from an ideal traffic stop. Okay, she was not belligerent towards him. She's not angry at him. She's just down. They say that she's had a history of mental illness, and that's one of the things that they try to use against her, not only her, but a lot of people when they're in this type of situation or any type of unfortunate situation with law enforcement in particular. The fact that quote unquote she has a history of mental illness is is pretty common, and there's a lot of assumptions rolled all up into that. A lot of which are probably not true, as you can probably pretty quickly see if you are or know someone who has dealt with mental illness or personality disorder uh, in yourself or in someone close to you. But the first conversation doesn't take long. He comes back to the car, to her car, at about 8.5 minutes, I think, and he says he starts talking, but he doesn't last long, and then he asks her, "What's wrong? Is there something wrong? What's wrong?" Something to that effect, because you can tell from the video that she's still down, and so she gives him a pretty short explanation, not disrespectful in any way. She just says, "I moved over for you because you were speeding up behind me, and now I'm going to get a ticket." Something along those lines. The actual video, I'm not quoting her, but the actual video is pretty clear that the audio is pretty decent. You can hear what's being said. And then she stops talking after 10 seconds. I mean, she answers his question with concision and in a forthright manner. I mean, she's explanatory. She's not saying things that are unreasonable. She's just not in a good mood. It's not, again, it's not an angry or belligerent mood in any way. You can just tell that she's down. Like, I've gone through quite a bit of my life similar, and if you're a long-term target of narcissistic abuse, you can probably relate pretty well yourself. Sort of like a fatalistic attitude, like whenever something bad happens, you expect more bad right on top of it, because there seems to be some element beyond chance in your life that causes consistently negative outcomes. And if you're talking about what some people refer to as covert narcissistic abuse, the more backstabbing, rumor spreading, other words for it, a pernicious, passive aggressive, narcissistic abuse, using lots of third parties and stuff. That's kind of how your life is. You perceive your life as there being some thing rather than chance. There's like chance as being overridden by something which causes consistently negative outcomes beyond what other people experience. And this can really, if you're, say, for example, if you're a child, or if you in it for the first time, for a year or two, and you're starting to realize that something's different from how things used to be, you know what that feels like. There's going to be an interim between, or in a lot of our cases, there is an interim between when we first understood that something was wrong and when we understood narcissistic personality disorder is what's wrong. That's a dark time in between those 2 points. That's probably some of the darkest times that a lot of us can refer to in our lives. And so I think if you're not in that situation still, I think if you look back to your life when you were in that situation and you ask yourself what you might have sounded like if you were in a situation such as hers. Now, keep in mind, on top of the other things that happened, my understanding is that she's from Illinois and moved to Texas the day before. Okay, so I don't remember if it's her first time in Texas or not, but she's been in Texas one day from Illinois, which, let's face it, I mean, she's a black girl, and Texas has a little bit of a reputation, if you know what I'm saying. Whether it's deserved or not, that's for other people to say. But it is there. It does exist, okay? And it can be intimidating to a lot of people. And even to myself. I mean, I've been to parts of the South with my hair not cut real short, and there is a difference between how you're treated in that part of the country over certain things versus how you're treated in some other parts of the country, such as Illinois. So there's a lot of intimidation factors that can come into play, let's say, which could facilitate, if she had some kind of if she's struggling with any kind of depression or any kind of situation such as what, I talked about before, where it's not actually clinical depression per se, it's a natural response to a bizarre situation. If, for example, I mean, we don't know, is she a target of some kind of narcissistic abuse? Is she in a long-term relationship with a guy? Or with one of her parents or both of her parents? Or other, relatives that lived nearby, if you're talking about a close-knit community, was there stuff going on that she may, you don't know. But either way, there's really no justification at all for what happens next. And what does happen next is she finishes telling her short story about why she's not in a good mood, why she's sad. And I think sad is a good word, because to say she's down, to say she's upset, to say she's depressed, I mean, these all have hints of, like, varying degrees of hints of anger in them. But to say she's sad, I don't think there is any there's no hint of anger in that. There's no connotation of anger in that choice of words. And I think if you watch the video, you'll agree that that could be, you know, one of the more accurate descriptions of her demeanor, because she's not lashing out at him really in any way. I mean, she's just expecting negative outcomes. And so she answers his question, and then she stops talking after not very long. Okay. And then the officer waits for another couple of seconds or so and says, "Are you done?" That's what he does. You watch the video, it doesn't, you know, it might slide by you, but if you think about it, it doesn't fit at all. I mean, that's not, I mean, if you're considering yourself a public servant, you're already not serving the public. Okay? People have a right to be in a, people have a right to be sad. People have the right to be in a down mood. People have the right to have a mental illness. People definitely have a right to a negative reaction to a target of narcissistic abuse or another type of any other type of abuse. So it's already, you know, from my perspective, when you're talking about narcissistic personality disorder and narcissistic abuse, a lot of my viewers who come in here from those types of channels, those types of situations, can understand readily. But if you're coming here from another type of scenario, let's just say that I won't be able to explain it in this video. Maybe a more concise way of putting it is like the analogy of the internet troll. The internet troll is someone who seeks out negative reactions in other internet, you know, online users, people who post comments and stuff. They post comments which are essentially designed to yield negative responses, emotional, you know, anger or disgust, or, you know, and lashing out, you know, calling the troll names and whatever other reactions they can harvest from whatever situation they find. This is kind of, I mean, this is essentially that type of behavior. His reacting in this way is essentially that. He's taking this situation and he's turning it as negative as he can without seeming to do so. And it's designed to facilitate an escalation of the situation, let's say. All right? I mean, at this point, as far as I can see, and maybe even before, he's already targeted her for some kind of confrontation or something. But at this point, it's perfectly clear that he intends for this situation. He sees an opportunity to create, to take a bad situation, you know, sees a negative, and he decides to make it worse. Okay, is basically what it boils down to. And that's what he does by saying this. He says, "Are you done?" And she says, "Yeah, I mean, you asked me a question, I answered the question." All right, something to that effect. Again, the video makes clear, but then he stops for a moment, and he says, "Would you put your cigarette out, please?" But he says it, you know, in kind of like he has this weird emphasis on the word please, like it's almost like childish, like he's playing a child's game. And the way he says it, first of all, is it doesn't fit. B, it might be almost like a you know, realizing he's on camera and trying to make an extra effort to not sound like he's being an asshole, even though he is being an asshole. On top of that, he's asking her something that he really doesn't have any right to ask her. I mean, you know, what they say is that he was just going to give her a warning. Okay. People say, well, why did she get into this altercation if all she was getting was a warning? Well, he never got to the point of telling her that he was giving her a warning. You know, he had several opportunities by this time to let her, you know, to brighten her day. All right. And tell her that she's only getting a warning. She doesn't have to be so down about it. But instead, he decided to attempt to manufacture the worst possible outcome. So she, at this point, she just says she doesn't need to put out her cigarette, okay? And then his next thing is, okay, get out of the car. And she starts asking him, what's the problem? And he says, you're resisting. Okay, that's, police love that. I have one of my videos on, and I shouldn't say generalized, police love that, but police who are caught in abusing people who don't deserve it, they'll often use that very, very quickly in the altercation. You're resisting. Uh, that's like a catchphrase. I mean, you can actually watch one of my videos, and it's not a laughing matter at all, but you have to laugh at the absurdity of this guy doing this, even though he's on camera and he knows it because it's his own cameras that have recorded it. This guy pulls over, and they run up to the car yelling, "Stop resisting! Stop resisting!" And pulling him out of the car like immediately, yelling, "Stop resisting!" And he's not doing anything. He's just got his hands up and sitting there the whole time, not doing anything. And they got him on the ground, and they're handcuffing him, and they're still yelling, "Stop resisting! Stop resisting!" And he never did it. They just decided to behave this way. So the reason I bring that up is because it's kind of an illustration of, if you haven't seen other of these videos, okay, then this may not seem out of place to you. His saying "stop resisting" so early in the altercation. But if you're from one of the communities that gets targeted for this type of behavior a lot, you're certainly probably more likely to have seen these other videos. And so as soon as you hear "stop resisting," you know that you have major problems. As soon as you hear those words from a police officer, you understand that you have serious problems, because the way abusive police use this phrase is, basically what they're telling you is, I am now choosing to escalate this confrontation and blame it on you. It's basically what a lot of people will hear when police say those words, because of their behavior. Because they've used those words to communicate that, or while they're doing that so many times in the past. Some people are simply going to make those associations the next time around. I call this video "The Killing of Sandra Bland." Now, am I saying that the police actually hung her up in her cell? I have no way of knowing. But as far as I'm concerned, they're complicit in her death to some degree. There's some degree of complicity from the beginning, from the moment that the officer decided to send the conversation in an awkward direction, rather than do what's right, do what's good. Some people say in certain types of arguments, they make the argument, if you kill someone outrightly, forthrightly, physically, kill them, what you've done essentially is remove the end of their life from them and cut it short at the end. But if you instead take a section of a person's life out of the middle, are you killing them to any less degree? Now, yes, they still get to remain alive technically, but if you're preventing them from doing anything, if you're locking them in a cell or a closet or whatever, they're not really having any opportunity to live their life. Okay, is that a form of killing too? And in the wider perspective of it, if you look at it that way, then yeah, she was already being killed before she got hung. She had been in jail for 3 days. For what? For pulling over without using a signal for an officer who was also not using a signal. I mentioned earlier about how a target of narcissistic abuse can relate, many of us can relate to her mood, whether, and that's not to say whether or not her mood was caused by something similar, but let's say for argument's sake that maybe it was, or if not her, maybe the next person, not diagnosed, okay? If she was a target of narcissistic abuse, she'd be in that dark stage. She would have not yet known that that's what it is. I don't think. Of course, it's possible that she did discover it at one time, like I have, and the only record of my having done so is my videos on my YouTube channel. If I hadn't been making YouTube videos and I was found hanging today, that's all they would be able to say of me, is he had a history of mental illness. And that rolled up would encapsulate a lot of misconceptions that prevent a lot of people, the vast majority of the people, from understanding what's really going on, what these people are really going through, what they are being put through. Okay, you're not. I mean, these off moods and such things are not internally created due to a chemical imbalance. These are natural reactions to somebody else's behavior. Okay, it's okay to have those. It really is. Now, if you're talking about her or someone in her situation with a parent target of narcissistic abuse, uh, that's one thing. But another possibility is if you look at Sam Vaknin's videos, I'll post a link down below where he talks about uh, police being the type of job that people with narcissistic personality disorder are attracted to. And if you listen to other of Sam Vaknin's videos, you'll hear where he talks about, and a lot of other people talk about too, about how targets of abuse, from one, any type of long-term target of abuse, it becomes an easy target for other abusers. They can sort of sense it the way a predator senses. They say the way that a lot of hunting animals hunt is they single out the one that can't walk right if it's walking differently, limping. They hone in on that, and you can think of it for someone with narcissistic personality disorder honing in on a bad mood in a similar way. Okay, and targeting that person. So these people, particularly when they're undiagnosed targets, unidentified as targets, they are prey, all kinds of prey for all kinds of misbehavior on the part of other people who, if they didn't sense this weakness, would act totally differently. Now, am I saying this particular officer is narcissistic personality disorder? No, I can't. There's no way for me to know that for sure. But I can tell you that if he did, he seems to have acted about as consistent as an expert would expect. I mean, let me know what you think. If anything he did was inconsistent with narcissistic abuse, you know, people will say, well, he said he was only going to give her a warning. Well, maybe that was the whole idea, is he never intended to get to that point in the conversation. You know what I'm saying? If you're talking about narcissistic personality or narcissistic abuse, that's certainly not beyond the realm of possibility. So let me know what you think, what your thoughts are on that. I've told you mine. And so I'll go ahead and call this one here. Thank you for watching, and I'll talk to you next time.